All right, welcome everybody to Legal Tech Week for November 6, 2020, our weekly Legal Tech Journalist Roundtable, where we talk about the week's top stories and various other things that hit our fancy as we go through this. My name is Bob Ambrogi. I am the author of the blog Law Sites, and I also have a podcast called Law Next, where I talk about innovation and technology in law. And let's have our panelists introduce themselves. Molly, you want to start?
Sure. Molly McDonough. I'm a communications consultant in the Chicago area, and I produce the podcast Legal Talk Today with the Legal Talk Network.
And Nikki?
I am Nikki Black. I am the legal technology evangelist with My Case Law Practice Management Software. I write legal technology columns for the ABA Journal, Above the Law, the Daily Record, and the My Case blog, among others. And it's a good thing we're having this webcast today, because there's not a heck of a lot else to talk about other than legal tech this week. So this is going to be great.
Yeah. Caroline.
Yeah, hi, Carolyn Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, based in the UK. We have a global audience. And yes, we've been watching all week. And yes, I've been doing Zoom calls late into the night with plenty of people in the US who I don't think have drawn a sober breath for like the last few days. And it's been kind of fun.
All right, Victor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I'm an assistant managing editor with the ABA Journal. I handle the business of law and technology. And I don't know what people are talking about. It's been a very boring week here. I mean, like we've been voting for Dancing with the Stars, and we've been voting for some other things. So yeah, I don't know what's going
on. Zach.
Hey there, everybody. My name is Zach Warren. I'm the editor-in-chief of ALM's Legal Tech News, based in Minneapolis. And Minnesota actually picked a nice week to be back up to the 70s for once. I can go outside, get a breath of fresh air. It's a good thing, I think, needed this week.
Yeah. Victoria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria. I'm a reporter at Legal Tech News, where I write about legal technology and the intersection of technology and law. And I'm based in the Philadelphia area. And this article I will discuss is important, but probably more people are about other things going on in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania right now. But, happy to be here.
Yeah. We're counting on you for a tally on the vote count coming out of Philadelphia. So.
Yes, if you stay tuned, I will tell you exactly who wins in Pennsylvania. Just
all right. Joe.
Yeah, Joe Patrice from Above the Law. If you joined this show because you saw Bob's tweet, I don't think Steve Kornacki is going to be tuning in. I think he's still busy. But I have loved how he's become a internet phenomenon. People are making memes about him. There's fan clubs now, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, and Steve.
Steve Embry, Louisville, Kentucky. I published the blog Tech Law Crossroads, which is about legal innovation and legal technology. I left practice of law with a big law firm to start that blog a few years ago, and as Bob has pointed out, make the really big bucks.
Yeah. It does feel hard to believe that there's been anything that happened this week other than the one thing that's occupied so many of our minds. Even Caroline is being occupied all the way from across the pond there. But a few other things did happen, and so we're going to maybe talk about something other than the election, except that there are actually a couple of election related stories, and maybe it's appropriate to kick off with a couple of those. Some of the votes that were taken that had at least a tangential relationship to legal tech, relationships to law and technology in a broad sense. Zach, you brought up one of those. You want to talk about the CPRA?
Yeah, I can. The California ballot initiatives were really interesting to me. Prop 22, obviously, being the one that got a lot of play, that Uber and Lyft threw so much money into. But the CPRA also passed, which is kind of the CCPA 2.0, you could kind of say. It expanded a lot of privacy rights. one major thing that it did, which is going to be huge for compliance professionals, is it did another category, a subcategory of personal information called SPI, which has even more strict guidelines around it, which kind of brings it a little bit closer to the GDPR and some European privacy regulations. So this is obviously just for California, but I also do think it's interesting. We've been talking a lot about national privacy laws, just how expansive is what California is going to be. The fact that it passed fairly easily, I think is interesting because it shows that these measures do have a lot of public support and are something that I wouldn't be surprised to see some other politicians outside of California pick up sometime soon.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that? I mean, I think one thing I've noticed is that what hasn't been, there hasn't been as much attention on the fact that there has been legislation in probably every state in the United States very similar to what California has been doing. I mean, they haven't all passed, or very few of them have passed at this point. But I think that you're right, that this is really a portending of things to come all across the country in terms of strict privacy laws. And we're going to see a lot more of that.
Is there anyone who isn't developing for GDPR already? Making sure that they're compliant. It seems to me that's what the current standard is.
Yes and no. I mean, if you don't do business in Europe, like I know there were some major US corporations that are only US based that said, we just don't have the bandwidth to do something like that right now. So we're going to keep it only to the US highest denominator, which at the time was CCPA. But as things start to move more in that direction, it's going to kind of be what you have to do, keeping to that highest denominator, but that bar keeps raising and raising.
Yeah. I don't know the specifics of the California law all that well, but one of the questions also is just what level of business they reach down to, and I mean certainly the large corporations of the world are all getting ready for, or not getting ready, more than getting, they have gotten ready for this. They have adapted for this, but smaller businesses I think are very unprepared for some of these privacy laws.
Sorry, I clicked away for a second to get a link. I definitely do agree with that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think was interesting in there is it expanded protections, classifying emails and passwords as personal data as well, which could have implications in major data breaches in California in particular, opening up to, I would imagine, a lot of litigation there.
Yeah. Yeah, and Victor, you had brought up a couple of the measures also that were on ballots this week. One of them from my home state here in Massachusetts. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So the one near and dear to my heart was the magic mushrooms one, but yeah, I'll talk about the.
And that's near and dear to your heart. Why?
So yeah, I thought it was interesting. Just like I guess there was this ended up being the most expensive ballot measure in Massachusetts, and so I thought, I mean, I don't follow Massachusetts that closely, especially not the ballot measures, but I thought it was interesting that this was the one that broke the record. But basically, yeah, it says that there was a question sent to voters about whether or not independent repair shops can continue to whether or not to make it so that they can't they have to keep so basically sorry, I'm having trouble explaining this, but basically
so did everybody in Massachusetts, I can tell you that.
It'll require them to keep using an open data system so that it'll facilitate repairs, and that you don't have to take it to like the specific dealers to get it fixed. Independent car dealers can fix the cars because they can have access to the open data that's in the car that's being used, and so it prevents people from using proprietary data. I think there was a issue about going wireless, so that there was a loophole in the law that didn't include that. So this closes that loophole. So now that this pretty much means that like you have to keep using this data, and manufacturers won't be able to create their own proprietary data that would force you to have to go exclusively to them to repairs, as opposed to like independent car repairers and dealers and whatnot. So I thought it was interesting, because it's not something I ever thought about. It's just kind of like, okay, well, you just take your car to whoever and get it fixed. Like, who cares? Who cares what the details are? Who cares what data they're using, as long as they get it done, right? So it never really connected in my mind that, like, oh well, how are they gonna how do they fix it? How do they get access to this kind of stuff? How do they do this? How do they do that? And there was all kinds of incentives for companies to kind of create their own data, so that their own proprietary system, so that then you'd have to go to them for business. So yeah, it was just fascinating to me, because I never thought about a lot of these permutations, and so I'm glad that it turned out the way it did. But yeah, it was pretty surprising to me.
Yeah, it was really confusing, and I have to say, I mean, I read so much trying to figure out how I wanted to vote on that, and everything I read gave a different description even of what it did, what data was involved in it, because Massachusetts already had a right to repair law, which gave those independent repair shops access to the data in your car. When you plug in a computer, when you plug into the connection to the computer in your car, independent repair shops under Massachusetts law, and probably most states' laws, could already get the same data that the manufacturers and dealers can get. But this had to do more with the data that your car, as I understood it, the data that your car transmits. Like if you have a newer model car that has, can't even think of what it's called, the little button you sometimes see right up above the windshield where you can OnStar, like an OnStar system or something like that, where it's transmitting data about where you are and how fast you're driving and things like that. As I understood it, this had to do more with that kind of data, which can raise some real interesting issues. But
I thought it raised a lot of really interesting issues with respect to who owns data.
Yeah.
Most people would probably say, I go out and spend $30,000 for a car. All the data that car generates is mine, right? Well, maybe it isn't. Now, maybe in Massachusetts it is, but the interesting thing to me about it was we had the legislatures stepping in and saying, no, car manufacturers, you don't have the exclusive right to withhold that data from repair shops or even individuals, which would tend to suggest that manufacturers don't own the data. And it's really owned by all of us. Now, all of us have contracted away our rights to the data in more times than we can count. But again, the interesting thing is now that the legislature, or the people in Massachusetts, I suppose, since it was a referendum, have stepped in and said, no. I don't care whether you contract away or not, right?
Yeah,
it's your data, and whether you signed a little waiver of that doesn't matter now. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm going back to Zach's point about the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I also, when I saw that measure was voted through on election day, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was another example of, like, I guess it's a win for auto mechanics, but now they also, I think I would assume, like, small businesses, they now have more risk now. Like, they have access to that personal data. And I kind of wonder, like, will they put in the data breach cybersecurity measures to make sure, like, that data isn't exposed? So I don't know if under Massachusetts data breach law, if that type of data would be considered personal information. And if it was breached, they could maybe be held to I don't know if it's private litigation or regulatory risk. But I kind of wonder, like, how are those companies now going to deal with having access to that type of data? We're already seeing with, like, the CCPA, like, small businesses, they're struggling with it that are under the scope of the CCPA. So I'm kind of wondering, like, okay, these mechanics have access to more, maybe doing more business, but now they have to make sure that they have perhaps, like, cybersecurity measures in place now.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the reasons this was so heavily financed is not that it was being financed by independent, like the local garage down the street from your house, but by all the repair chains, like the Meineke's or I don't know what all those chains are, but independent repair chains that are all over the place. They were really financing the opposing side or the pro side of this, I guess.
And I guess the car manufacturers were heavily funding the
right. Yeah, the
opposition. So that's why it generated so much much money poured into it.
Yeah.
Well, this was probably one of the only like interesting races in Massachusetts this year, right? I mean, I think Markey pretty much had his brace in the bag after he won his primary, and we knew which way they were going to go in the presidential election. So I guess really this is the only one with any kind of suspense.
Yeah, it's off tech, but we had our other ballot question was on whether we should adopt ranked choice voting like Maine has, but that got defeated here. So.
Too bad. It's a good idea.
It actually, I actually voted for it, but it's a complicated idea.
I think it's gonna actually have a moment because there are some states where the libertarian vote was bigger than the difference between Biden and Trump, and I think the Republicans are going to start deciding suddenly that they love this law too.
Yeah. We had a couple of horror story elections in Massachusetts that I think prompted the initiative in the first place, where people got elected who really shouldn't have gotten elected by a small percentage out of a big pool of candidates. All right, what else is going? Caroline, tell us some good news from.
Well, I had a question. How's Kanye getting on? Is he doing well?
No, he conceded. He's getting ready for 2024.
Did he ask for a recount? Yes. I've learned lots of new stuff this week. I learned about a new type of food from Joe on Twitter. I forgot what it's called. But,
what kind of food?
What's it called, Joe?
Migas, eggs and tortilla mix. It's kind of a Mexican breakfast sort of thing.
And apparently you eat it whilst wearing pants, so we decided that on Twitter. So this week, this week, so there are a couple of things, but so Deloitte, one of the big four, as we know, bought a law firm, Kemp Little, which is a top 200 law firm. They sent it out as a press release quite early UK time, saying that it was a landmark transaction. So initially I thought that it was just like Kemp Little had done some work with Deloitte or something. And I think a lot of people, it seemed to take people a while to realize that actually Deloitte had bought Kemp Little. And then suddenly like everyone sort of fell off their chair. And I spoke to the management. They've been talking for about 12 months. And what's really interesting about it, so Kemp Little is not, there's been such mixed reaction in terms of how significant it is. I think it's really significant, but then a lot of people have been saying, well, it's not like they bought one of the top 50, whatever. So it's they're kind of like dulling down the significance of it, but nonetheless, they bought a top 200 law firm, which is really good in telecoms. They've got some really amazing telco clients, and they're really, what's really interesting, they're niche, and they're really tech focused. So if you look at what people are saying in terms of what law firms need to be to survive, they either need to be obviously really high end, or they need to be niche and really focused. They are really niche and they're focused and they're really good. But their managing partner, Andrew Joint, started speaking to Deloitte about 12 months ago because he was starting to see the writing on the wall in terms of strategy. He was like, what are we going to be? So he saw that because Deloitte have been putting together project management, all of the tech-led stuff, and obviously they've got the huge financial backing. They decided that really the future would be better taken care of within this big organization. And obviously the big four again, and it sparked up conversations about the 90s, because obviously this is not the first time the big four have acquired law firms. So then there's all of this stuff about, is this the 90s again? And so it's just been really interesting, and that's I think that's probably been the thing that's caused the most chat on social media this week, in terms of like the acquisitions, etc.
How many lawyers total does Deloitte have now?
It's a good question. So I wrote it. It's about, so in the UK, there's in total globally. I should know this off the top of my head. I'll post it. I'll find my article. I think it's over. They've got over 2,000. I think in the UK. I'm going to find it because I'm talking shit. Yeah, they've got a lot. All of the big four. This is the interesting thing that I made this observation, which is that and I'm going to post a really interesting paper in the chat section that I read from a few years ago, which really digs deep into the rise of the Big Four and the growth of their. I mean, obviously it's a few years out of date, but it's brilliant. They've been saying that this is not. They've been growing ever since the 90s. It's not like suddenly their legal teams have just started appearing. They've been growing for years. That I think PwC's got over 2,000. I've actually written it somewhere, so I'm going to post it in the chat. It's a lot. Each of the Big Four have got upwards of 1,500. I just can't remember which way it is, but they've got a lot, and it's been growing for years and years. This was kind of like, and obviously EY bought Riverview Law, and they bought Thomson Reuters Pangea 3. So this isn't the first acquisition, but it's the first time they've bought a law firm since they did it around the first time around.
I thought it was a pretty big deal too when I read about it. I've written several things about the Big Four and their not so subtle motive to move into the legal space, particularly internationally where they can, but also in the United States. I listened to a panel discussion at the ILTA conference with 4 members of the Big Four, and they talked a lot about focusing on enterprise solutions versus legal solutions and this holistic view of clients and how to serve them. And I know, Bob, Mark Ross was on your podcast. It was fascinating.
From Deloitte, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember him saying, we really need to look at who should really be doing what when it comes to legal work. Yeah. And this whole notion of kind of unbundling various pieces of legal services and then pushing them to various units within the organization to get the work done. And, I'm going to talk a little bit about alternative legal service providers and what the future may hold for them. But to me, the more the Big Four move into providing alternative services, the more clients are going to flock to them. One of the reasons that they flock to law firms for some of these alternative services now is the name recognition of the law firm. It's sort of the old IBM motto, you can't go wrong for picking IBM. Well, you can't go wrong for picking, you plug in whatever AmLaw 100 firm you want to pick there. Mm-hmm. And so there's this reluctance to say, okay, well, we'll split some of the work off and send it to Elevate as opposed to letting it all be done at a law firm. If the option is instead sending it to Deloitte, who everybody knows, and many clients already have connections there, then that's an easier sell to make. So to me, that's where the growth, I think, may very well come.
That's absolutely right. I don't think, from reading various things and speaking to clients, I think that the legal advisory bit, so they've always been known for the process and doing things really efficiently and perhaps being much more efficient at automation and all that kind of stuff. But the legal advisory thing I think is interesting. So some clients, you'll read, they wouldn't think of going to Deloitte, and I think this is where they've really decided, obviously, to now attack. And I think by buying a law firm with existing, so Kemp Little's clients, for example, include BT, Reckitt Benckiser, some of the big FTSE 100 firms in the telecom, in terms of like telco work that they do, and then. And I think you're right, absolutely right, Stephen. So they can do, and they talk about, they're very clear. I think they're very clear in the way that they think about the work. Whether it's like project management, whether it's consultancy, whether it's advisory, and they're productizing a lot of their work, and they're being. So I think they're very because obviously they've kind of nailed it within professional services within Deloitte itself. It's almost like they have that. Track record in terms of how to scale and how to do it efficiently. It's really interesting, but whether they'd be really interesting to see with the advisory stuff, who they start to compete with, which bit of the market, because I think some clients are still wondering whether they would go to them. I think that's going to change though.
And there's already been several, I'm not sure what you call them, arrangements, maybe the best word for it in the United States, with law firms and one of the Big Four. There was an immigration law firm that did that, and I think a couple of maybe a labor law firm that did that. And it's sort of this effort to kind of skirt the ownership rules. But I mean, for those kind of specialties, it would make absolute sense for the law firm and the accounting firm. I mean, for the law firm, you've got access to thousands of clients.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, we did a feature looking at the Big Four and their incursion into law a couple of years ago, and they've long been kind of seen as like the sleeping giant, because it's like, because it makes sense, right? If you have an M&A deal, you have to call in accountants anyway to go over the books. You have to call in compliance people anyway to like determine whether or not you're violating any like securities laws and whatnot. So I mean, why not just have it all in one shop, especially with a reputable accounting firm like one of the Big Four. Obviously they're not immune to, they used to be I think it was the Big Five before that, and one of them's not there anymore. So they're not immune to scandal and malfeasance. But if it makes economic sense to like have it all under one roof, then why not? And it'll be interesting to see, because the big reason why they've kind of been held at bay here is because of like Stephen was saying, the UPL laws and non-ownership laws and that kind of stuff. But now that some states are starting to relax those, it'll be interesting to see if that gives them like sort of a way in.
So they have to keep order here. They're not at liberty to cross sell quite as much as that. They have to, so they have to kind of, and I'm not as up to speed, I'll be honest with you, with the latest on this, but in terms of they're having to separate out audit, and they're having to, because there's a sort of concern about being anti-competitive and all of that kind of stuff, and also just the perhaps abuse, trying to protect against potential abuses if they're doing everything. So I think they do have to have some degree of separation, but yeah, I think that it's going to start. It's fascinating, and I think what's going to be really interesting is to see what play the other Big Four now. I mean, EY has obviously already been quite aggressive, but it'd be really interesting to see what PwC and KPMG do now. And Molly, in answer to your question, EY has over 2,500 lawyers.
Yeah, they do also have financial industry regulations that they have to adhere to, and of course, a lot of these firms are already doing financial services work for major law firms, and so they have a real potential for a conflict of interest, although.
Exactly.
They clearly would have to spin off separate entities to do any kind of legal work in the United States if they were going to try and if the practice rules were simplified. I had a conversation with another of the the Deloitte executives recently, where I like what he said. He said that I just had it in front of me and just lost it. But basically what he said is we're providing the scaffolding for the different kinds of services that are being offered, that we can offer and that law firms are offering, and that we want to be part of the whole broader ecosystem of delivering legal services. So they're still kind of downplaying their sort of central role as delivering legal services and playing it up more as supporting the broader ecosystem. So. But that does kind of lead into, Steve, the article that you were talking about with the ALSPs, or the report that came out on ALSPs. Do you want to talk about a little bit more about that?
Sure. The report came from Brad Blickstein and Beatrice Ciribello, and Zach interviewed them on his podcast, and that's where I've heard about it. And so sorry to poach on what you did, Zach, because it was a really fascinating interview. But their whole theory was, and they did this study of a number of law firms, that law firms are forming these captive alternative legal service providers in order to compete in the marketplace and provide some of the services that more traditional, that's the right word, alternative providers are providing it. And when you looked at the numbers at first blush, it did look like there's some element of that. I mean, 35 of the AmLaw 100 firms, according to this study, have formed these captive providers. But when you drill down a little bit, of those 35, only about 9% actually formed an independent entity, alternative legal service providers. The rest of them basically have units within their law firm, like the e-discovery unit or something like that. And so the whole issue to me is, how how far are these captive providers going to be permitted to do work that the law firm as a whole is doing, the partners and the associates were doing, because you're really cannibalizing billable hours, right? If you move it to into this captive, which presumably will be a cheaper and faster and more efficient option that you're going to tout to your client, then that means some work that some lawyers in the firm were doing that they won't do anymore because it'll be done by this captive. And where we have an excess number of lawyers in a lot of firms, particularly at the mid-level, that's going to be tough for the law firm to be willing to do, I think. So I'm not sure at the end of the day how far you can take this study, other than to say, yes, it does look like there's a recognition on the part of some of the bigger law firms that this could be important. I'm always reminded of Aaron Street with the lawyerist who told me one time, he said there are law firms that want to be innovative, and then there are law firms that want to say they are being innovative. Mm. And of this 35, my guess is that some number of them want to say they're being innovative when they're really not. And the other piece of it too is, of course, that lawyers are terrible at ancillary businesses. There've been a lot of law firms that have tried to do this. And the problem is most ancillary businesses and alternative legal service providers are primed for this. Most of them are not based upon a business model that is the billable hour. And so that's a fundamental sort of clash, it seems to be, in making these things work. One of the offsets of it all may all be at the end, though, that clients of these firms become more accustomed to dealing with alternative providers and more willing to look at alternative providers such as Deloitte or EY or what have you, or even the Elevates of the world. So by trying this, the firm may end up pushing clients more toward it. I just can't see law firms undertaking the type of investment in technology, in maintenance, in being on the cutting edge over the long haul that a traditional alternative provider would do. So I don't know, Zach, you actually talk to these guys. You may have some thoughts. You may disagree with me entirely.
Well, I mean, a few different things out of that. We did that, but we've also done a lot of reporting just on the captive ALSP kind of rising ecosystem. My plug, Breaking Tradition on law.com, go check it out. But one thing that has really popped out as I've talked to a lot of the people who have these captives is it does start as e-discovery work a lot of the times. And I think that particular survey said that 80% got their start in e-discovery, something like that. But what they're trying to do progressively is go up the value chain as much as possible, whether that means contracts, whether that means kind of rote document automation. They're trying to take baby steps. And a lot of them, they really are just beginning because they started within the past 5 years. But as they grow and grow, they're trying to not only be a value add for the firm's lawyers, but take on separate business themselves. And that's what really I think is the ultimate end goal for a lot of these law firms, is just diversifying the portfolio as much as anything else, as they're trying to compete with more outside influences like the Big Four, who are coming into the legal space. They're saying, okay, well, if our business is being taken from X, let's try and develop Y a little bit more. And it may not work. It's completely possible that it doesn't. But I think it's worth a shot to give us some sort of outside source of income here.
It was interesting that they didn't include, they did not define the alternative legal service providers in such a way as to include the 650 kind of thing that Wilson Sonsini is doing, which I think is, may end up having a lot more traction. For a captive to try to climb that value ladder, that's where I see them running into problems, because as you're climbing that ladder, you're taking work away from lawyers for the firm.
So I think that the issue, so this is more common. I think we're probably this is a bit more normal. So Clifford Chance has got applied solutions. Allen and Overy has long had slightly, you wouldn't call it captive, but they've done derivatives work. So we've had for quite a long time international but UK headquartered firms creating their own, and it's becoming increasingly common. And the reason is, I think, because there's a few reasons, but they see that that they will lose the work. It's not. I mean, I take your point, Stephen, and I think there must come a point when there's a bit of it probably doesn't sit comfortably, but I think they will lose the work because it's not going to be done within the firm at a price point which is acceptable to the client. And then secondly, they want to probably approach it from a very more tech-led way, so that and possibly, so for example, with Clifford Chance, they're productizing a lot of their services. They've got Clifford Chance Draft, which is where they're where they're sort of white labeling their automation stuff. So the reason why I think they're finding it easier to do it within a separate company is because they struggle within the body of the firm to do it at the right price point, because obviously, as you pointed out, when you're working within the billable hour, when you try and do it within the firm itself, that's when it becomes competitive, right? That's when you're in fact eating away. And so by creating a separate entity, and they can almost protect it and operate at a lower price point. So they're keeping the work within the firm, but they're not. It's almost like they're not competing to the same degree. That's the way I kind of view, and it seems to be working.
And that's why I was so interested when I read that only 9% of them had actually set up separate entities where you might have a shot of having that kind of independence to be able to do a lot of these things, like climb, the value ladder. And I guess it, to kind of brings me back to Aaron's observation. There are firms that truly want to be innovative, and firms that can do this and use these captives effectively and market it and sell it and give their clients a better service. And then there are firms that just want to say they're being innovative. Yeah. And if this, as you push this out beyond the AmLaw 100 and get into the 200, there are a lot of firms that want to say they're innovative.
Did you pick up on Recurve? I forget who's at the Recurve ALSP. Do you know? Did you look into that, Zach? I know it. I can't think of it right now either. Hold on, I'm going to find it. So anyway, that's got to be next one. I'll be interested because that's one of the ones the newer ones in the US, isn't it? Greenberg Traurig, that's it. Okay. So the Greenberg has got their own captive called Recurve. I haven't picked up. That was launched last year. I haven't heard much about it since.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned that in the chat as well.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah, one thing kind of to Stephen's point, though, it's kind of a fine line that a lot of these captives are trying to draw, because at one point they're kind of shifting who they're competing against, because they are competing against the Elevates, United Lexes, et cetera, of the world. Yeah. But if you're doing that, then price point probably isn't going to be your main selling point. What is your main selling point? Your connection to the firm, the availability of lawyers if you do need to scale up what that work is. So at least people that I've talked to, I know that's Reed Smith's model with Gravity Stack and other. Well, that's kind of their selling point. So they need to be connected to the firm somehow, but how do you do that while still not having the billable hour? It's a real tightrope, but it's an interesting one.
Yeah, Gravity Stack. For anyone not familiar, you should look at it. They're doing some super cool stuff, which we won't talk about now, but
yeah. And that's the biggest argument. The best selling point, I think, is being able to have that reputation of the law firm to stand behind it, which, again, is why the Deloitte thing was interesting to me, because, if you're a Deloitte and have the name and reputation and brand, and you have a law firm that can do some of the work, you might have enough of the package to swing the work away from traditional law firms.
Yeah. We should move on to another topic. And Nikki, you've been kind of quiet today. What do you got this week?
I don't think I hear that very often. I think I've been accused of being too quiet. It's good to hear.
You're probably sitting there watching CNN with the mute on.
No. Well, I wrote an article for the Daily Record here in Rochester about a New York ethics opinion that caught my eye. I always track the ethics opinions here in New York, because oftentimes in New York, they're very active and they issue opinions on all sorts of interesting topics. And this one, at first glance, really was just very COVID specific, but I actually think it has sort of some access to justice and legal tech implications. So essentially here, let me post it in the chat. The issue was there was an immigration attorney who was concerned about COVID, and the immigration court was requiring in-person appearances, and the attorney wanted to withdraw of counsel due to concerns about safety protocols and COVID. And the issue was, can a lawyer withdraw from representation of a client because of those concerns? And the ethics committee said, yeah, it's basically the standard is, let me make sure that I've got this right, whether representations become too difficult. And it's a flexible standard. In this particular case, what they said was that this attorney's reticence to appear out of concerns, safety concerns due to COVID, could affect the attorney's zealous representation in any number of ways. The attorney could possibly rush through a hearing, could encourage a quick disposition on the case. It would affect all sorts of potential decisions that the attorney makes in terms of representing the client. We're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to act in the best interest of the client, but that these were valid fears that the attorney had, and therefore the attorney could withdraw as counsel with permission of the court, but then had to take the steps that you normally have to take when you withdraw as counsel to ensure that your client wasn't prejudiced. But what particularly caught my eye was, although this seemed to be a very clear-cut issue, attorney withdrawing because they're afraid of COVID, actually has a lot of legal tech and access to justice issues. Specifically, if courts are not during COVID are not using legal tech effectively and are requiring people to appear in person rather than having the technology available to have these hearings occur virtually, essentially you are putting the clients in a position of not having what I would argue is access to justice, access to the best counsel that are the most knowledgeable, the counsel that do this on a regular basis. And so it's affecting the representation that the clients are receiving. So I thought it was interesting for that reason, that the failure to, on the part of some courts to have technology in place or to put it in place at this point, it's been a while, is affecting access to justice. In this case, it's not exactly the access to justice concept we all necessarily talk about. It's, in this case, it's just a general broad access to justice and of access to the best possible counsel. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was particularly interesting, especially because I'm in Rochester, New York, I like to follow the ethics issues in New York and how they're addressing them.
I think it is interesting. I've seen, I do some arbitration work, and I've seen a number of parties that are not willing to do an arbitration hearing virtually, even though that option is available to them. But they're also not willing at this point to go in and conduct a live hearing. And it's usually the lawyers I'm talking about. It's not the clients they're representing. It's the lawyers they don't want it. They don't want to do virtual. They don't want to do live. They want to keep pushing the cases down and down the calendar, hoping that, eventually things will get back to normal. But in the meantime, their clients aren't getting their day in court or their day in an arbitration hearing, whatever it is. And there's often tension between the counsel on the two different sides, where one's willing to do virtual and one's not. And it's an interesting issue, and you don't want to, I don't think anybody wants to push somebody into having to do something in a physical context right now if they're uncomfortable. Like, people have all sorts of good reasons for not wanting to be in a physical hearing, even with some safety measures in place. Maybe if not themselves, maybe they're caring for somebody in their home who's more susceptible or whatever. But I don't have any answers, but I think it's definitely going to continue to maybe become even more of an issue as this pandemic stretches on longer than anybody wanted it to. Anything else? We got Victoria. What do you got?
Hey, everyone. Earlier this week, I wrote an article about Thomson Reuters. Last week, they released a press release where they looked into legal tech patents that were filed across the globe. And China was the leader. They filed China-based applicants filed the most legal tech patents last year in 2019, and also in 2018, China also led that had that distinction. And I looked into why that is. And speaking to pretty much IP lawyers, they said in China, artificial intelligence patents are China files the most AI patents. So they said that it made sense that they would also file the most legal tech patents because a lot of legal tech is is powered by AI. And also one attorney who works in Pillsbury in their California office, and he also spent his time before COVID-19 in China. He noted that in China they have online virtual courts, and that China's legal system is a little bit younger. I think they finished putting it all together in like the early 1980s. So they can be fairly flexible and kind of adjust to technology and leveraging technology. And because there's such a lawyer shortage over in China, the court system really encourages their citizens to leverage legal technology to help them in the legal process, because it sounds like a lot of Chinese citizens have to be pro se for some matters because they don't have a lawyer available to them. So legal tech is really needed over in that country. So that's one of the reasons why he said you'll see so many legal tech patents filed in China, because it's so heavily relied on in that country. And also one person also mentioned that China, the government for government sponsored companies, they also help subsidizing the patent filing application for them. So that can also encourage more companies to file legal tech patents because they have a subsidy from their government. So it's kind of interesting. And with those things kind of going along, and like the lawyer shortage isn't really going to be fixed anytime soon in China, it's likely that you'll continue to see a lot more legal tech patents being filed in China.
Interesting.
Thought it was interesting too, just from looking, we all here look at the startup scene and think of it as very US centric, but I've noticed more and more, not just international legal tech companies in general, but international legal tech startups in particular, who have been reaching out my way, which I didn't really have probably 3-4 years ago, but have definitely seen an uptick, and particularly in China. It wouldn't surprise me if that's something that continues from here on in, specifically because of what Victoria's talking about.
Yeah, China's been active. I mean, there are hotspots. South America, Brazil has a number of legal tech startups. I mean, all over the world, obviously, but it's interesting to see how global it is.
Does anyone here? Sorry, Victoria, did you find out about many? Have you spoken to any of the startups that are applying for these patents in China? Because I reported on this too. I didn't really look into it too much, not like you did, but I just was curious because it made me think I probably need to do more digging, because it's very obviously a lot of this stuff is coming out from China, but I personally have not had too much. I've had contact with startups from Singapore and certainly global, but not so much from China, to be honest with you. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it was a little bit like my Google researching, and it was a little bit difficult to find China based legal apps, and a lot of them, even when you do Google Translate for English, is a little bit difficult to get in contact with them. But it definitely sounds like a thriving market. And one of the attorneys, he even mentioned WeApp. That's an app, but he even said there's many apps inside of WeChat that's specifically for online virtual courts. So I think it's something that's definitely thriving, and kind of understanding it. It's maybe, and why I think a little bit why you see the use of virtual courts and having legal tech and even apps on smartphones, because you don't have that many lawyers in China. So you don't have that group in the United States to say, hey, hold on, we don't want that competition, even if it is maybe for an individual civil court matter that wouldn't make a lot of money. But from some attorneys, we see the pushback in this country to some legal tech and for the court system. And we see some lawyers saying, no, that would take away money from me. And court judges, when we say, well, some of these people are indigent, they wouldn't be able to pay you anyway. And they say, no, you could possibly take away work. So I think kind of like that's something that's motivating in China. That's a big reason why I think you see so many legal tech patents, because you don't have that group saying like, no, this may take work away from me. So it's definitely, I will try to keep in check, trying to keep track of like the China legal tech to see kind of like, oh, how's it developing? And COVID-19, I can't see it impacting it too much because of course, a lot of people definitely don't want to go into the court system right now. I would think most people, except for what Bob was saying, some lawyers maybe want to say, oh, I'll just push back to go into arbitration. But I can kind of just see more people using these types of tools to remotely handle their court proceedings.
Yeah, I wish I could remember the name of the company, but there were 3 women from China at ABA Tech Show back in March who I met because they read my blog and they came up to me and said, oh, I love your blog. And I had my picture taken with them. But I got their card and I'm forgetting now their name, but they had it was a legal research company, but they had an interesting sort of AI spin on it. And I can't remember the name of it right now, but so that was fun. Anybody else want to comment on that before we move on? Molly, Joe, I didn't hear from you this week. I know Molly's got something you want to talk about.
Well, it's oddly related to this because it's related to a lot of what Victoria and Carolyn have been saying in terms of what consumers are used to and where the market is headed. That makes a lot of sense to me that in China, where the tech has already been embraced so much by the culture, it's not a surprise that it's moving more quickly into legal. And one of the things that I've been enjoying since all this lockdown is that these virtual lunches that Ari Kaplan hosts. And one of the things he's been doing is that and Stephen knows this too, on Tuesdays, he has these feedback forum events where he invites a legal tech vendor to come in and basically pitch their product and do a demo. And it's turned into kind of a Shark Tank version. Some are very
time goes on.
Some are very brutal. Some are really mellow. Most of it, but there are always a lot of questions and activity in the chat, and it's been interesting to kind of see that progress. And this week, it's not a new technology or a new company, but it's still in infancy in law firms. And Jared Correa came on to talk about with Ethan Field, his co-founder of Gideon Chatbots, to talk about using bot technology for law firms. And I'm thinking, gosh, isn't this like really common? No, well, because I'm used to bots for everything I do as a consumer, right? So, but in legal, very few law firms are using the technology. And so it's really interesting to kind of see this development. The product was really well received by this crowd, which again, like I said, is somewhat unusual because this is a tough crowd. Steve, were you at this one? I can't remember if you were.
Yeah, I was.
Everybody was really, like, even Jared was like, well, I thought this would be rougher, but people were really into it and excited by it. But there really isn't a lot of adoption in this space. So I thought that was, I thought it was really interesting.
What's the company called, Molly? Sorry, I missed it. What's the company name?
Gideon Chatbots. And Nikki wrote about it in January. I think there are like 3 others that serve legal, but Gideon is much more focused on the legal process and intake and triage and routing matters.
Because I think one of the reasons so there's been a lot of so Brian Inkster, who's a UK lawyer, he created a series called Chats with Chatbots. And the focus was to show how crap they are and how within the legal context they don't work. And he would try to go onto a law firm's website and just mess with the bot and like ask it questions that it couldn't answer. And then he would post this like long article about how crap it was. So I think that, that's quite, I don't think there's been an awful lot. It's chatbots are so common now, but I don't think it's interesting that obviously you rate it.
Yeah, I was kind of impressed by the product, kind of on two levels, or for two different markets. For the smaller law firms that are often looking for individual or small business kind of clients, it would be pretty valuable just as an intake mechanism to kind of sift through what's real and what's a possible valuable, valid client, and who's really trying to get you to recover the $10 million that's left in the Brazilian bank account. That I get some of those every day. But a lot of general counsel will tell you that one of the things that they have to deal with, and is very time consuming, is calls about, simple legal questions. Do I have to get this notarized, or from various constituent groups within the organization? And I've been thinking about it. A product like this could be valuable in saving, a lot of time for those very simple sort of, questions that a lot of non-legal professionals might have within an organization. So that was a pretty cool product.
Yeah, and Jared is sort of my neighbor, lives not too far from me. So we always say we're going to get together, and then we only meet when there's actual trade shows to go to or something. Joe, did you have anything you wanted to bring up this week?
I didn't. As you might imagine, my week was spent doing slightly different things. So yeah, I've just kind of been watching our old friend Steve Kornacki all day, and yeah.
What else is there to do?
So I don't know if I told everybody this. So Kornacki, he was basically the last person I met before lockdown. I ran into him in a bar. I hung out with him all day. Huge college basketball fan, super nice guy. We made plans to when the tournament comes, we'll all meet here, blah, blah, blah. I was so excited. I was like, this guy's awesome. Let's hang out more. And then the next week was, now we're locking down. So, but it's nice to see him getting a day in the sun.
Yeah, he's a day and night and day and night in the sun. Yeah, I was just going to mention real quick, one story I did this week was this, the launch of this company. It actually launched over the summer, this website called Zira, or is it Zyra? Now I don't know. XIRA. And I thought it was kind of interesting. They're basically a lawyer marketplace site or a lawyer matching site, where potential clients can come and find a lawyer. And those kinds of sites are a dime a dozen, I think. I often don't even bother to write about them when they launch. But what I thought was interesting about this one is they're really focusing on solos, and not only are they matching potential clients to law firms, but they are providing law firms with a fairly complete sort of back-end practice management system entirely for free. So it's really only appropriate for a solo. It's not a full-fledged practice management solution, but any solo can go on there for free and use it for their current cases as well as any cases they might get through this site. And it's got document management and billing and invoicing and calendaring and all of that sort of thing. Plus, it's got online calendaring where any client can come and schedule time with you. And it's got they even include the Zoom video conferencing subscription. They pay for that, so you can do Zoom video conferencing with your clients, and it's all free. You pay. The only time you pay anything to them is if a client comes to the site and books and shows up for a consultation with you, then you pay them $30. So I thought that was an interesting take on this, and they're really kind of targeting, as I say, solos or even almost like part-time solos, people who are maybe, not even practicing full-time or something.
Yeah, you nailed exactly what I was going to say, because I talked to them a little bit ago too. And that was what really stood out to me as part of their business model is I'm really targeting people who maybe haven't practiced law in 5 years or looking to get back into it. My law license is still active, but how exactly do I pick up people? So I thought that standpoint was kind of interesting and something that I haven't seen a lot of marketplaces do. Be very curious if they have success with it.
Yeah. Are they concerned about the fee splitting?
Well, I was gonna.
Yeah, that's what.
Well, it's the old marketing fee issue. If you're just paying a flat fee per client, then I think most.
Yeah,
ethics
Yeah, and it's
boards who
actually
say
one of
that's
the things
okay.
that Gideon is doing differently, because there are chatbot technologies out there, but what they're doing is integrating more with the law firm systems and doing kind of a flat fee instead of a per person lead, which is starting to get really expensive for law firms.
Yeah, but if you call it a management fee or something for using the platform for the meeting, and I think
Well,
I don't think it's a problem.
There's a fine line though, right? And every jurisdiction approaches it a little bit differently, and it can be sticky. And just because they approach it one way doesn't mean some angry lawyer is not going to bring a lawsuit, which we've seen happen in the past with other companies, or multiple lawsuits and ethical claims across the entire country that end up costing the company hundreds of thousands of dollars to combat. And that, we all saw that happen with one company years ago.
Didn't Avo try something like this where it was like they would pay,
that's exactly what I was
flat fee for for matching, and then they had to shut down or something. Or I don't know.
Avo's was you would pay. It was a flat fee for a it was for a flat fee for a consultation with a lawyer. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say. This is exactly like this. This is not the first time this is rolled out. First of all, when I was writing my cloud book in 2011, Charlie Moore reached out to me and was talking, I think it was a tech show, a Rocket Lawyer, and telling me how they were at that point allowing, I think it was documents to be uploaded and free storage, and also some other tools in the cloud for people that use that to obtain lawyers, to get clients and then continue to represent them using Rocket Lawyer. Yeah. And then Avo Marketplace rolled out. And that, it's not and then that had a lot of these tools in the backdrop too. That was about 3 years before Avo got acquired. And some of that was what was problematic. And that's why they had a bunch of different ethics opinions against them in a number of different states. And that fee splitting is always tricky. And you maybe, I thought it was not necessarily uniform across the jurisdictions, but I could be wrong. But
I haven't seen anybody really fighting it for a while. Any ethics panel really bringing these cases for a while. I kind of feel like they lost their steam with Avo. And
when Avo got acquired, it moved out of the marketplace. But there were several states that actually, my recollection is they actually amended the rules in order to allow some form of fee splitting as a result of what Avo was doing, because of course the big argument is it's an access to justice argument, right? And you've got people that really need lawyers and there's no way to find out who they are. And that resonated with some of the state bars. I can't remember which ones they were, but there were some moves to amend the fee splitting rules with various guardrails put on it. At least that's.
But in some ways, it's a marketing ploy, in my opinion. It always has been, the access to justice through platforms like that. Access to justice is truly, when people talk about access to justice, it's people that are about to get evicted or have custody issues with their children and can't afford a lawyer. And that's not what these sites provide. They help people write a will. It's not what the true access to justice issues. And I know I've brought this up multiple times in the past. I'm in the minority on this, I think, but I think they're the issues that were addressed by LSC, and all the defunding of LSC is what has caused a lot of the problems at a federal level with that. But sometimes I think it's a little bit of a marketing ploy to claim that those sites solve the access to justice issue, and I don't actually see that.
I agree with that. I think a lot of these sites claim, what they're saying, what Zero is saying, and is that they're going to help lawyers charge less by giving them all this software for free and making it easier for them to find clients. And maybe that will, it's an access to justice issue. It's an access to justice issue to a degree. It does maybe provide some more lawyers at a more affordable rate, but you're right. It doesn't get to the core issues of access to justice that the Legal Services Corporation.
But if it's like small firms, I was talking the other day with somebody who's thinking about offering free licenses to small law firms because they're struggling to survive. And I actually ended up reaching out to the Law Society, and we're going to meet next week, or chat next week, to talk about how, because it's really interesting that they should be doing, they should be able to use tech quite efficiently to be able to work, remotely and all of this kind of stuff. But actually, some of the smaller firms, I think, are the ones that are really struggling, aren't they? Like, they don't have the expertise, and they're using quite traditional processes. When in actual fact, it shouldn't be that difficult for them to become pretty tech forward. But it seems to be, so from statistics from the UK Law Society, they said during COVID, they said 66% of high street firms reckon that they couldn't survive COVID. So kind of there's an access to justice. I'm going to take Nikki's point, but there's kind of an access to justice point there in terms of just enabling them to operate if they are struggling to use technology, which a lot of them are.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nikki. I think I probably misspoke. It's really more of a consumer benefit, if you will, because most consumers, particularly individual consumers, but a lot of small businesses, they don't know how to hire a lawyer. They don't know how to assess a lawyer. They don't know what lawyer to call. And, the only thing they know is what appears in either social media or on TV. And, that may not be the best way to hire a lawyer and learn about a lawyer. And so, yeah, it's access to justice, maybe in a sort of an indirect sense. It's really more consumer access, I think, now that I've thought about it.
I had a different question though, Bob. Did they show you the software? Is it any good? Giving it away for free seems kind of a red flag, but
Well, it's very rudimentary. It's not, like I said, document management. You can do invoicing. You can get paid through the platform, although they charge extra if you want to accept e-payments. But and the calendaring integrates with your whatever calendar you're using, whether it's Outlook or Google. So it's very basic. Lists of cases and contact information and calendaring stuff. As I say, there's no ability to collaborate with others or share information with others in a firm. It's a one-person set of products. But it's fine for a solo. I think it doesn't have everything you'd want necessarily, and it doesn't have accounting or anything like that, of course. And I don't even think forget whether it even integrates with an accounting platform, but I don't think it does. But
Molly, maybe we should recommend that they go into Shark Tank on Tuesday. We'll find out.
I'm bummed because I missed so many of them because I used to have a conflict on Tuesdays, and now I'm just like I'm obsessed. It's my new favorite thing. So it's a mean group.
Yeah.
Bob, you seem like if something happened to your audio, it's like you're underwater. Maybe just that. Maybe that yeah. I'm not sure what happened, but it may just be a sign that we've gone over, and the internet gods are saying that it's time to close. I don't know.
So I turned my volume right up, thinking it was me, and then Stephen spoke, and it went boom in my ear.
All right. Well, we're done anyway.
All right.
Oh my God. Okay.
We are out of time anyway. So thanks to everybody. Can you hear me at all?
You sound like you're somewhere far away.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to my mic. This happened another time once too, but all right.
Oh yeah, when we had to stall and try and look like we knew what we were talking about in your absence.
That was hard.
Yeah, we were like, oh, okay. Yeah.
All right. Everybody go home and have a good stiff drink while they watch the election results.
Victoria, any news from Philly?
Okay. No, I did not. I just got word. Yeah, I don't have any. I don't know what the election's gonna happen. I don't know.
We got to get gritty on this.
Oh yeah. Go up to South Philly. Yeah. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.